you'll hear it here. Hi, this is Tom Lane, DM2 Software's Vice President of Marketing. I would like to welcome everyone to today's Year-End Prep Connections webinar. Before I introduce today's presenter, I'd like to go over a few housekeeping items. Because of the number of attendees we have on today's webinar, everyone's phones will stay on mute. If you have any questions during the webinar, please enter them into the question window that you see in the lower right of your screen. We'll try to answer everyone's questions at the end of the webinar. If we're unable to get to your question, we'll follow up with you individually after the webinar. Today's webinar is being recorded. As soon as the recording is available, we'll post it on our customer content page of our website along with our YouTube site. We'll also put a copy of the presentation material up on our website as well. On that note, I'd like to introduce professional service consultant Denise Austin, and Denise is going to talk to you about how to get ready for year-end. Take it away, Denise.
Thank you, Tom. Good morning, everybody, or afternoon if you're on the East Coast. Thank you for joining and giving me the opportunity to share this with you. So we'll just jump right in and get started. I just wanted to let you know I've got a little bit of a cold, so I apologize in advance for the coughing and possibly clearing the throat, so I apologize. So let's go ahead and get started and just review at a very high level what we are going to be talking about today. The first thing is 13th period, talking specifically that Sage 100 allows you to have 13 periods, why you might want to use it, and giving some more insight as to how it affects motor fuel taxes. Month-end versus year-end, so we'll do a little bit of a dive into that subject. Period end and year-end preparation, so what steps do we need to do to prepare for this? Module closing logical order. There is definitely an order in which we should close our modules. Discuss checklists and how important they are in making, making your process, your monthly process, as smooth as possible. And then the last thing we're going to talk about is payroll and AP reporting. Payroll and AP is a little bit different than the rest of the modules, so we'll take a quick peek at what you need to do. And then finally, we're going to open it up for any questions that you might have. As Tom said, rather, if you'll just put those questions in the box, excuse me, at the end, we're going to answer them for you. So the first thing on that agenda was talking about a 13th period. So 13 period accounting, basically how that is, it's 13 periods per year, each with 4 weeks, for a total of 52 weeks in 1 year. Pardon me. It's perfect. The reason why some CPAs like to do a 13 period situation is because that's where they make their adjustments. All the other 12 periods, they are actual transactions, and then the 13th period are those year-end adjustments. So you can define monthly periods in your fiscal year maintenance, and essentially a 13th period would look something like this. So we've got 1 through 12, so that's January 1st to 12/30, and then 12/31 is your 13th period. Any transactions that are made for those adjustments would go in, or even 12/31 would go into that 13th period. One caveat about this, so it's exciting and it sounds great, but it's not recommended for motor fuel tax reporting. So if you're doing motor fuel tax reporting, keep in mind that Petrolink does not follow the same rules in a 13 period scenario. So just keep that in mind. So now we're going to jump right into month-end versus year-end. What's the difference? There is a little bit of a difference in preparation for that. You can get to month-end and period processing from the same place. It's period-end processing on the period-end folder or menu for each one of the modules. And it really depends on what module period you're in. So if you're in period 11, then when you select period processing, it's going to be a period. It's going to be period in processing. So my example here is period 11. So it knows automatically that it's period in processing. However, if we were in period 12, as it shows here, you notice that the option is a little bit different. So the system knows, depending on your period that you're in, based on the fiscal calendar, it knows whether or not it is going to be period in or year in processing. So on period in, what that does is it's going to close all of the period to date balances and move them to prior periods. So if you can visualize, if you look at AP or AR inventory, you see current and then you see prior period. That period in processing does that task for you. When year end, it clears the year-to-date accumulated in your master files inventory, AR, AP, and prepares you for the new year. So that is what it does for all of them. GL is a little bit different. It's going to roll at year-end processing for GL. Not only does it put, it moves everything, it'll also roll the income and expenses into retained earnings. So it clears out the income and expenses. Okay. And then in payroll, it resets your year-to-date earnings totals for your employees. It also resets any benefits you might have, such as vacation or sick leave or PTO. It's going to set that back to 0. If you have carryover hours for those, it's going to carry those hours over. It's also going to set tax limits and 401k deposit limits back to 0. So year-end, as you can see, has a lot of impact. So what we're going to discuss is upcoming is how do you protect yourself so you prepare and protect, so if you do year-end and something goes wrong, you can always roll it back. All right. We know that year-end can be extremely hectic. Even month-end can be hectic, but based on what we just looked at, there's really the impact that year-end does. There are a lot of anxieties. So you need to, in addition to all your normal duties, you have to produce accurate financial statements. You need to prepare for new accounting month. Fiscal year, if the fiscal year isn't out there, you need to set up that fiscal year. Before you do that, or as you're doing that, you want to make sure that you have a tested backup. So to mitigate some of the problems you might run into, these are some things you want to make sure you have a tested backup, and we're going to really dive into that in a few minutes. Follow suggested order of module closing. There definitely is an order, and again, we'll dive into that. Create and follow checklists. Those checklists are very important because it prepares you, you know exactly what you need to do, and as you tick them off, you know it's done. And then create a period in processing team, period in / year in. So that's a best process, a best practice, because what a period in processing team is going to do for you, it's a group of people, and it should consist of operational and accounting people. And what that's going to allow, they're going to create together, they're going to create a schedule that has the process, the checklist, the order of module closing, and these are going to be, after a 1 or 2 module year-end and month-end closings, they're going to be seasoned. They're going to be able to be comfortable with it and know exactly what is going to happen, and it's going to be smooth for you. And even though it doesn't change from month to month, having this team together, following checklists, having a schedule is going to make everything, ensure everything's going to go smooth. So when we're, excuse me, for preparation. So you have this team that you created, right? And you have, you've got your team, but you should, in that team, there should be at least one person that's going to initiate and manage the closing process. So letting everyone know it's time to close, it's time to, you know, these are the things that you need to do. You need to to make sure all your transactions are done, etc. So this person is going to really be that leader of that team, relying on his team to make sure that their sections get finished. One of the things that you might want to consider creating is, excuse me, a department to module cross-reference. So, for instance, the customer service department, stage 100. If you had a customer service manager, the modules that they're going to be responsible for are sales order and bill of lading. These are your customer deliveries. This is just an example. Inventory control would be, inventory management, purchase order, bill of lading, accounting, receivables, etc. So having this department cross-reference is going to make your team and your leader being able to send an email, a mass email to these people to let them understand that we're getting ready to close. Make sure that you have your tasks done. Excuse me. So when you are getting ready to close, you need to make sure that everyone's out of the system. And how do we know if everyone's out of the system? I'm sure that most of you are well versed in Master Console, but just for those of you who aren't, this is a really great tool. So you can open Master Console, and it's going to tell you who's in the system. You can send a broadcast message, and if you click on that, it allows you to print a message, to type in a message. I think it's about, I don't know, I counted it before, but I can't recall. It's probably about 75 characters. So, getting ready to close, please exit. And then people you can hit refresh as people are exiting. But what happens if there are some folks that maybe are not at their desk? By hitting shutdown, it's going to shut them down. Be careful though, because you do run the risk if they're in a data entry type situation. You'll want to make sure you're just going to their desk and closing it. But if they were at the launcher or at an inquiry, then hitting shutdown is not going to hurt anything. So module closing. There are a lot of modules out there, right? And this is just a sample of some of them. You may or may not have all of them and of everything that DM2 offers, but there is an order in which you want to close modules. And so basically what that is, that order, and I'll show you the list here in a few minutes, by following that order, you're going to make sure that a module that writes to another one is processed first. And a perfect example of that is sales order. Sales order invoices post to inventory and they post to accounts receivable, right? So it releases inventory, updates the customer receivable, and then the daily transaction register, the GL. So it should be processed before you should do your period end before you do for inventory and accounts receivable in general ledger. So there, I like to call it the bottom up. So if you were to look at your menu, if your list of modules, if you move from the bottom up, then you are always going to close the module before the one that needs to be, in the order that it needs. So module close order. This is an example. So you'll notice the first thing that's here is the first step is system backup. So you're going to want to make a system backup. So the module closing order is job cost, purchase order, equipment manager, bill of lading. This is just an example, again, using that bottom-up theory. Card lock, inventory, payroll, etc. And last one is general ledger. Some of these do not have a period end, for instance, bank reconciliation, but you still want to leave that in your order of closing because what it's going to remind, possibly, you may need to record some bank transactions before you close your general ledger, so it's left on there. So it's just a good practice to have there. So again, this is an example. Take a look at what you have, and you're going to be able to, you'll adjust your list accordingly. General ledger is always the last one that is closed. Some people don't close their general ledger on a monthly basis, but clearly the yearly, it's really the last one that's closed. Backing up your data. How do we do that? the simplest, the most efficient way of doing it is when all your current period transactions are complete, you can make a copy of the data for each of the companies that you have. And the easiest way to do that is using company maintenance in Library Master. So on the main menu. So what I did is I created a company code, L15, and you should be doing this for also, you may do it monthly. We have a lot of people that do this process monthly, and so then you use some type of algorithm here to represent what month they are, what company code and what month it is. Or quarterly for payroll, definitely you want to do it quarterly, but we're talking about year-end right now. So I created this company code, and I called it year-end backup, L15, I know it's my Larson Conner Holdings company. Once I create that, if I select copy, then it's going to prompt me for a source company. And I'm going to take that source company, select that, and select proceed, and it will back it up. So it'll make a copy of it. That is the most efficient way of doing your backup, right? So you're making a copy of everything. You have it as of at this point in time if you need to go back to it for all types of things, for W-2s, for any kind of payroll questions, for 1099s, anything like that, it's there. So once you, pardon me. So if you're going to use that backup, so if we were going to come back here and reprint W-2s or redo 1099s, you're going to want to make sure that you have your address, such as your copy, your company, your legal information. So your legal name and your telephone number, your federal and your state ID. So it's always a good idea to put that in there. So then we mentioned about testing your backup, right? So you've got a backup data and you have a backup company, and it's great, but I always recommend that you test it. And so to be able to test that backup, the best thing that you can do, the easiest way to test that is go to this company code, create, open it up, go to General Ledger, and print the trial balance. Compare that trial balance to the trial balance of your company code, your live company code, and if they match, they match. You can do that also for AP and AR. That is testing your backup. So you just, especially at year end, you really want to make sure that you're confident that that backup is in working order. Okay. Checklist. Sage offers, so there are checklists. If you were to go to any of the help options in Sage, whether it be in the resources panel or whether it be just down at when you actually go into any module, you can get to a help. Sage has got a very robust help. They do have checklists for your period checklists, and you'll notice that each one of these, this is just a snapshot of it, but if you were actually in the health system, you could click on these hyperlinks and they're going to take you to the steps. Perform period in processing. So it says if you want more information, go here, and it's going to walk you step by step what you need to do. So this you could use for a basis of your checklist when you're creating them, right? So back up the accounts payable files into a monthly set of backup or disk. That tells you how old this is, right? They haven't done this in quite a while. So most importantly is you back up your AP file. So this is the AP year-end processing, period in year-end processing, and then it just walks you through. So verifies that all invoices and checks are reported for the month. Of course, you're going to have that on your checklist, and you're going to go, and that's going to be one of the things that you send out to your department, to your people on your team that represent a department. Performing the period in processing, select the reports, and print at least the aged invoice report and the check history report. Again, when you're making your checklist, you would put there's a lot of reports to print, but the most important ones are for AP anyway, are the aged invoice report and the check history report. You're going to complete the period in processing, after whatever report you've chosen to print. And then they say to back it up. Then when you run, they say to back up the AP files using a separate set of disk or tape again, back to the 90s. So you can, or you don't necessarily have to back them up again, but just clearly just go in and check and make sure that you are now in your next period or your next year. So this is a sample of AP. Here is a sample of AR, and you'll notice there's a few more little things that you need to do, right? So again, making sure that these are done. But these are a great thing to use as the basis of your checklist. And then here's another sample of the general ledger. General ledger is a really interesting one, and I would refer to this one because there's some things that you may not remember to do. If you're using budgets, you want to make sure that you create a new budget, right? So you're creating your new budget. If you have any recurring journals, you can use a general ledger worksheet if you wanted to. That's been around forever. Doing any journal entries that you need to. If you're going to revise any budgets, and then print your trial balance and standard financial statements for that period to make sure that everything's in excuse me, in balance. And then, so there's some other ones. If you're doing allocations, you need to make sure that those are done. So these are, again, using these as the basis is going to be extremely helpful. Now I want to just I want to drop in and deep dive into what a checklist might look like. So purchase order checklist. So before you close, you're going to run all your purchase order reports and look to see if there's any outstanding orders. If you know, and this of course would be your team. If you have someone on your team that is responsible, your purchasing agent or inventory, they're going to know better than anything if an order's been received but it hasn't been recorded. So that's why it's really important to run that purchase order report. Make sure that all your receipt of goods for the month have been entered and updated. So again, that purchasing agent or whoever is in charge of that piece of the closing, they would know better than anybody. So I'm hoping what I'm doing here is reinforcing the benefits of having that team. So of course, when you're doing receipt of goods, you're always going to review those receipt registers before you actually update them. Check to see if there's any general ledger daily transactions that need to be updated. So if somebody ran a receipt of invoice or receipt of goods register, but they hadn't done the daily transaction.
Excuse me, this is Tom. Do you need to advance the slide? It's still showing the AR period end checklist. There you go.
Oh, no, it's been advanced.
Okay, there must be a little bit of a delay. It just came up now.
Okay, sorry about that. All right.
That's okay. I just wanted to make sure.
Okay. Sure. So printing the daily, just making sure that all daily transaction registers are updated as well. So after you've made sure that all your receipt of goods and your receipt of invoices have been entered, you're going to print period end reports, the required period end reports. I'm going to show you a sample of some. I have opened, so the top two are asterisks, and we'll talk about that here in a second, but these are a sample of all of the period end reports. You can add reports if you have reports from version 4.4 on, if you have actual custom reports that you use for period end closing, you can also add that to the list, to the period end closing list, report list. But at the very least, you should be running the purchases clearing reports in OpenPO format. Can everybody see the list of the reports?
Denise, for some reason, it's kind of pixelated. The before closing, those bullet points you have there are crystal clear, but when you brought these in, they're only partially. And try moving the slide back and forth a second.
All right. Let's see. All right. Tell me if it's
No, it's still there. We might have a slight delay here. Picked up a slight delay along the way.
Okay, how do you think we should do this? Do you want to
keep talking through that, and hopefully the slide will catch up here real quick.
Okay, can you see the list of reports?
Now it's starting to come in. Now it's readable. It's still a little pixelated. Here we go. It just came in. Now you're good to go.
Oh, okay. That's interesting. Purchase order clearing reports in the OpenPO format. That is required. You should be doing that every month. You should, at the very least, every month. We have customers that do it on a weekly basis, and if you have a lot of non-fuel purchases come in, you could do it on a daily basis. The total on this report must, and I should put in highlight, must balance to the purchases clearing non-fuel GL account. If it doesn't, you need to stop and do a little root troubleshooting and figure out why. Because they need to balance. There's reasons why they may not balance, and some of them are instead of doing a receipt of invoice in PO, they just did an AP invoice. But those are the things that you need to research. You would have found that if you looked at the open PO report and you figure, why is it still open? It hasn't received an invoice. Well, yes, it has. We have an invoice in AP. So again, part of that reconciliation. And then the open PO report. If there's any open POs for the month that shouldn't be there, you really need to take a look and see why. And you would do that by, expected receipt date. And maybe you haven't gotten an order or it was received some other way. We train everybody to do a receipt of goods through PO, but there are some people that just do an inventory adjustment. It's rare, but we definitely seen it before. There's also some other reports on here. I think the only other one that I would probably run that I actually like, it's not really one that's going to stop you from moving forward, but the receipt history report is really helpful as well. Okay. So our checklist, our balancing point. We talked about this just a moment ago. Running that purchases clear report and comparing it to the total to the non-purchase, the non-fuel purchases clearing GL account. So those should match again. And I'm excuse me, I'm restating this because it's very, very important. And if you do this, you're going to ensure that you've got a good, clean close. That is the balancing point. As you're creating your checklist, that's what you want to do. You want to have a before, and you want to have before you close the steps, and then a balancing point for everything. So everything should have a balancing point, whether it be back to the control account, for instance, accounts receivable. If you're doing a balancing report, your balancing point would be your AR trial balance to your GL control account, those types of things. So your checklist should have a balancing point. And then finally, the closing. Verify that there's no...
Denise, just to let you know, we're right at the top of the hour, so right at the halfway mark.
Okay. Verify that there are no open receipt batches for the month. Very important. That is receipt of goods and receipt of invoices. So again, making sure your daily transaction registers and for PO have been updated. And then set your module date to the last day of the month of which you're closing. In the select period in processing, run the period and year in. Confirm that the month being closed is the month you're expecting to close. Do you recall when we were looking at those period in samples of period in versus year in? It tells you what month you're closing. So if you think you're closing period 10 and it comes up and says period 11, then you need to stop and talk to and then stop processing everything and contact the closing control manager. That's another good reason for having a closing control manager. Okay, so then again, moving on with checklist, let's talk about some things that you need to complete before performing year-end for general ledger. Reconcile your accounts payable to your general ledger. Very important. If you're running into day audit, that should be pretty easy to do. So prior to reconciliation, you're going to make sure all your registers, this is for AP, all your registers and journals in your subsidiary modules have been posted. So, for instance, to AP, so job costs and purchase orders. So all of those are posted. Then you're going to make sure that all of the registers and journals have been in AP have been updated. So they're done, and the daily transaction register has been updated. Use the AP trial balance to reconcile to the general ledger AP account or accounts, and you can also use the general ledger posting recap. So you might say, well, why wouldn't I just use the AP aging report? And the reason behind that is because AP and AR, for that matter, the aging report, it's ran by invoice dates. Now, AP, excuse me, and you might be okay, and they should balance every month, the AP trial balance and the AP invoice report. But because it is invoice date, it looks at the invoice date. The AP trial balance looks at the transaction date. And that transaction date is what updates into GL. So looking at the AP trial balance to tie to your AP general ledger control account is the one that you want to look at. So I do like to use the general ledger, the AP general ledger posting recap, because what it does, if you haven't used it, take it after the next time you get ready to close. Take a look at it. You can make sure that no extra postings were made to the general ledger from a module other than accounts payable. So you can that's a good way to start reconciling. If you do find discrepancies, if the general ledger is incorrect, make any necessary corrections using a general journal entry, okay? But one thing I will tell you is make sure if you're going to make a correction in general ledger, do not use that source code as J if you've got like JE for general journal entry or AE for adjusting entry or GJ for general journal. Don't use AP or PO or any of those, because those are created by the actual module, and that is really how it tests that when that's what ties to the GL control account. So just make sure that that you're using whatever your designated journal entry source journal is. If the accounts payable module is incorrect, then what you need to do is you need to disable the account. So you go to general ledger, you go to AP options, and you unflag the integration to GL. Make your corrections, and you're going to enter the transactions, and you're going to update all the way through. And it'll say, do you want to update? Do you want to do a daily transaction register? And just go ahead and say yes. Just to get it done, it's not going to update. And then don't forget to turn the integration back on. So just make sure that you turn that back on, or else you're going to have a problem. Okay, so reconciling your accounts receivable to the general ledger. Prior to your reconciliation, just like with AP, you're going to make sure all of those subsidiary modules that post to the AP AR register, sales order, job cost, and the other things that post to AR, that they are also entered and they're updated. Then make sure that anything that's in AR, you don't have any open registers there, cash receipts, or any open daily transaction registers. Just like with AP, using the AR trial balance, that's the report that you're going to use to reconcile to your general ledger control account or account. And looking at the general ledger posting recap report in AR is also very helpful, just like with AP. Correcting your discrepancies, the same thing. If it's GL, make your corrections in GL using general journal entry and using the source code that you use for adjusting entries. If it's the AR module is incorrect, you're going to unflag the integration to GL and AR options, make your corrections, enter the transactions, update all the way through daily transaction register, and then make sure you turn that GL flag back on. So after those are done, you're going to enter any closing adjustments, you're going to generate and post allocations, you're going to print your financial reports, you're going to perform period and processing. So that's an example of your checklist for GL. But I am a picture person, and I love me a flow chart, and so I'm just going to kind of give you just from a visual. You want to confirm you have a year-end company archive, so doing that backup like we talked about, like we showed. Make any closing adjustments using general journal entry. Confirm the new year's defined and fiscal year maintenance. If you go try to do if you didn't have a year defined, what's going to happen is going to error out on you, and you'll know right away you need to define that year. But if you have a checklist, you will do that all ahead of time. Create a next year budget if you're using budgets. Generate and post any allocations if you're using allocations. Print your trial balance, your financial statements, and your GL detail reports. Perform your period and year-end processing. So that's one. So that is, that is a flow chart. So you could also create a flow chart as well. These are just some examples of some things that you can do. So you're going to proceed with your year-end. So to proceed with your year-end, let's just recap everything that we talked about. Confirm that your checklists have been completed by your period end team. So before you do your year-end, you're going to get with your team. They're going to confirm they've done everything that they need to do. You're going to create the test, create and test. Don't forget to test that backup of the company codes you're going to be closing. Confirm all users are out of logged out of stage 100. If they're not, you can look in Master Console and you can either broadcast or get them out by forcing that out. And then you would proceed with the period in and year processing in the module order. When you're following a checklist like this, you're going to, especially in the module, with the module order, you're going to ensure that each module is closed in the order that it needs to be closed. And having this checklist, you are going to make sure that every time you do a month end or a year end, it's going to be seamless. So the last thing that I just want to talk about real quick is payroll module year end notes. There are payroll modules a little unique in that, as we talked about before, there are, payroll does some things. Payroll does some things like it resets benefits and it does carryover hours and tax and 401ks. So it does quite a few things that you need to make sure you're prepared for. We're going to look at this as a real high, at a real high level, but we're going to cover really in depth in December. There is a payroll year-end processing DM2U class. So if you do have payroll, something you might want to consider. So several years ago, Atrix was introduced as an optional tool to use for W-2 and 1099 printing and governmental reporting for payroll. Now it's required. So tax W-2 forms for tax year 2015 or beyond, you must use the e-filing tab located in the payroll period in menu. So federal e-filing and reporting. So this is not only for W-2, but it's also for all your governmental forms, your 941s and your 940s, and there's a whole bunch of options there. Again, we're going to really go into it in depth. You can, by using Atrix, and it's required, so by using Atrix, you can either print your reports in W-2s, or Atrix has a fee-based service that will do that for you. So there's no tax, according to Sage, there's no tax tables for the fourth quarter of tax changes for fourth quarter of 2015. So there was one in the third quarter. The 2016 Q1 tax table updates and the 2015 IRBs They are scheduled to be available somewhere around the 28th. It's usually that last week in December. It flies by. It could be a day early or it could be a day late. It just depends on how soon they get it rolled out. And there's also an Atrix year-end update. The nice thing about Atrix that when you run it, it will go out there and find any updates out there, and that's going to be probably around the 23rd of December. That's what they're shooting for. Okay, forms. So when you're doing W-2 printing, if you choose not to use the Atrix e-file, let them do that e-filing for you. The forms are blank perforated 4-up W-2 forms. It's important to know. So if you're going and you're buying them, you need to make sure that they're 4-up. So you can also, the nice thing about using Atrix e-filing, you can send an email link to an employee, and they can actually, so Atrix will not only send them physically their W-2, but it'll also give them a password, and they can they can log in and get their W-2 as well. And for people who have to deal with W-2s, for payroll people, this is a huge load off of everyone's shoulder, because they don't have to constantly be going in and, in April or May, going to have to find the W-2. So they have this electronic link. The Affordable Care Act, the ACA reporting, so we started, everybody who has payroll and has over 50 or more full-time employees, or an equivalent of part-time and full-time, they are subject to employer shared responsibility provisions, otherwise known as the ACA. So they have to start tracking. Now, last year, I made sure that all the payroll people knew to just set their perpetual payroll, excuse me, making sure that they have that set. So by doing that, employers are in the background tracking employer coverage by month, a number of full-time employees. There is a Sage release, a product update for 4 and 2013 later this week. It was supposed to be out yesterday, but it didn't come out yet, and that's going to help accommodate all the ACA requirements. So just understand that it's we're going to need to make some time to be able to update for those of you that have payroll. Make sure that we get that, because we are going to need to. You're going to need that when you do your filing in 2016 for your 2015 information. Again, this is something that we are going to do a deeper dive, but I kind of want to give those of you, if you are doing payroll within Stage 100, just keep in mind that there are some changes that are going, so you may want to give yourself more time when you're doing your payroll.
Hey, Denise, just to let you know, we're at quarter after, so you're about 15 minutes to go.
Okay, and we're just about done. So
okay, great.
Here's some couple of deadlines. So February 2015, W-2 copies to employees. 2015, 940 and 944 to the IRS. Paper, if you're doing paper format, the W-2 federal SSA filing, or if you do the e-file with Atrix, you have all the way to March 27th. So those are just some governmental reporting jobs. Deadlines, mark them on your calendar if you have payroll. So the year-end processing flowchart for payroll is you're going to create a payroll year-end company and copy the data. That should be separate from your regular year-end. Print quarterly reports for quarter 4. Print or e-file your W-2s using and W-3 forms. You have to use Atrix. Print or e-file your 941 and your state forms, again using Atrix. Print year-end reports. Perform period and processing. Update the tax tables. There's tax tables that will be coming out. And then confirm that your perpetual history flag is on in your payroll options. It should be. There should not be anybody who is not tracking perpetual history flag. I went through with most folks and checked. Okay, then just quickly through accounts payable. Atrix is also used for your 1099 reporting. So if you notice on AP, it's a little bit different. You've got 1099 e-filing and reporting. So you have to use that for 1099 if you are doing 1099 reporting. So you can print your 1099s using Atrix, or just like with payroll, you can use the e-filing service. And Atrix, their e-filing, they send everything, they process it, they mail it, and they file it with all the governmental agencies. If you're going to print your 1099, you get the blank perforated form for the recipient copies, and the red 1099 and 96 forms for the federal copies. So just keep that in mind if you decide to print your own form. If you're e-filing, you don't have to purchase the red federal copy. Before you finalize your 1099 printing, you should be reconciling your 1099 amount. So you'll be able to see what your 1099 amounts are and go look at payment history reports. And so those should be reconciled. If they don't agree, then you need to make some decisions as to which one is right. So just like with AP payroll, there are some deadlines. February 2nd for 1099 copies to your recipients. March 2nd for paper format for your federal IRS filings, or March 27th if you're using e-filing format. And so that does it for me, and I'm going to turn it back over to Tom real quick to talk about what our next webinar is going to cover.
All right, thank you, Denise. Nice job of working through your cold there. You sounded pretty good. I just want to take this opportunity to invite everyone, or should I say, save the date on your calendar for December 10th to join us for our next Connection webinar. We're covering Sage Alerts and Workflow for Petroleum Marketer. For those of you who are familiar with Sage Alerts and Workflow, it's a powerful business activity monitoring tool that basically allows you to create alerts and triggers on just about any activity that could take place within your system or within third-party systems. But what we're going to focus on next month is we've created an event pack really specific to petroleum marketers. So you can see we've got a laundry list of items there that we've developed alerts for other customers on, and we've incorporated it into an activity monitoring package that we can install along with Sage Alerts and Workflow. So once again, we want to ask you to mark your calendar December 10th at 11:30 Pacific, 2:30 Eastern. And when I send out the message to let you know today's recording is available, that'll be the first opportunity for you to register for that webinar. There'll be an invitation included on that. All right, so on that note, we could open it up. We've got a few minutes left for any questions that you may have. So Denise, do you want to advance the last slide?
Yes, I did.
Okay, thank you. It just came up. We had a little bit of delay there. We don't have any questions at the moment, but let's give it a minute in case anybody comes up with any questions. I know that was a lot of material to digest. And then, as always, I know how it works. As soon as you hang up, that's usually when a lot of the questions come to mind after you've got a chance to digest this a little bit more. So feel free to email us at sales@dm2.com, and we'll work with Denise to get you answers to any questions that you may have regarding your year-end prep. Well, it doesn't look like we're getting any questions, so I think that means you covered the material really well, Denise, so thank you for that. So I just want to take the opportunity to remind everybody that today's webinar has been recorded. Once the recording is available, I'll go ahead and post that on our YouTube channel and also on the customer content page of our website, along with a copy of today's presentation. And as I said, I'll send out a message probably no later than Monday morning to let you know that those are available and give you a chance to register for next month's webinar. And still no questions at this point. So like I said, if you think of any questions after the webinar or like to find out more about today's topic, please feel free to email us at sales@dm2.com. Thank you again, Denise, for doing a very nice job of summarizing all the steps and tips on going through an orderly year-end closing. And I'd like to thank everyone for attending today's year-end Prep Connections webinar. That concludes today's webinar. Thank you.
Thank you.